This is Janus's game. He makes the rules. No guns allowed must be one of them.
By now, I'm not sure what your impressions are of the novel. Um, so, you've heard me talk about the human spirit. You've heard me talk about society. Obviously, there's a big societal message in Sirius and Limnic. You heard me talk about buildings being demolished. I bet it sounds pretty bleak, and to those listening out there, and to you as well. But even though it does include all of those things and social commentary about serious issues, it also has some fun moments. And I wanted to add some fantasy elements and add a different flavor to the novel because I think it's important about how, as a teacher, I know it's important how you package your lessons. And the ones that are flashier and tend to use more tools, I don't want to say gimmicks, but you know what I'm saying. They're the ones that stick in your mind for a long time. So that's what I did with this novel. I ended up taking the main narrative and I structured it as a popular video game genre would. And that video game genre is known as the Japanese role-playing game, or more popularly known as JRPGs. So, going back, when I think back, my history with video games, it's pretty long at this point. Um, I started my first game I probably played. I don't even remember. I just remember we had an NES, we had a Nintendo Entertainment System, and we had Mario Duck Hunt. But then I remember at first I was like, I couldn't play Duck Hunt. I would turn it on and I'd be like, why doesn't this work? What's wrong with this game? Of course, you need the light gun, the gun peripheral to be able to play it. But I didn't know that at the time. So that was probably the first game. I did play the original Super Mario Brothers. I was terrible at it. But um, yeah, I remember that was around. And it was funny because I remember my older brother, had actually won that Nintendo. He did like an essay contest or something, and that's how we got our first Nintendo. It was just like he won it as part of a contest. It was pretty cool. But anyway, so a big part of my childhood and really fond memories for me is actually just watching my older brother just play games. So he would rent games. We would rent games from like Blockbuster Video. We'd come back, and I remember calling my younger brother, being like, "Oh, there's a movie on or something." Anytime there was like a cutscene or something like that, it was funny. It was funny stuff. Good times. Well, the first game that I played personally that I remember like playing through and beating on my own was Mega Man 3. Man, I remember that joint was hard. I just remember Snake Man's level. Like, that thing, that took me a long time to be able to get through that on my own. But when it comes to JRPGs, the first one that I played through and beat and that I remember like enjoying was this game called Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals. So, looking back, Lufia 2 is pretty a typical JRPG, the top down, the kind of medievalish type themes with like ancient technology, that type. But I remember the story breaks. Like, there's this part like midway through, I think, where the two of the main heroes, Maxim and Salon, they get married and they have a kid. And the game, you defeat this really hard boss. You go through this really hard temple. I remember that game had a lot of really tough puzzles too. Like, that were kind of like, wow. At least they were hard for me at the time. So anyway, yeah, they get married, and the game shows you like a whole year of their life as they settle down in their town and get married. And I thought that was kind of unique. I was like, they're getting married in the middle of the game. Like, what's going on here? Where's the rest of the game? Like, that's what I thought at first, but then after a while, that I saw the meaning in it. I just remember the ending as well, like them. Well, spoiler alert for a 25-year-old game. They die at the end, and their souls kind of go up, and that end theme is just very emotionally impactful. I remember that to this day. So what drew me into these types of games? Well, when I was a kid, I really liked reading. Like, I always used to read. So one of the early books that I remember, series that I remember reading, was the old Hardy Boys books. So these are like, I can't remember when they originally came out, but I remember my library had them when I was in elementary school. So anytime I would finish my work early, which was like almost all the time in elementary school, I could just, you can go to the book and get a book to read. So I would read these books. So I really enjoyed those, and I felt like JRPGs were kind of those types of books translated. Not that they were like the Hardy Boys, but you know what I mean. Like, it was like this adventure, but instead of just like reading about it in the book, you're actually controlling the characters, you're building the stuff up, and I really like that. So really, it was the combination of gameplay and narrative that really got me into JRPGs, and I've always enjoyed those about those games. So even though Sirius Unlimited is, of course, a novel, it's not an RPG, but it does borrow a good amount of narrative conventions and structure from these types of games. So the first way that it incorporates the structure is just the structure of the characters, right? So in a typical Japanese role-playing game, if you're not familiar, you have either a single hero or you have like a band of heroes. And especially in JRPGs, they like bands of heroes. Like, these groups are usually like really young. They're like in their teens or something, even though they act like they're like super old. The old guy is like 30. I always thought that was funny. in these JRPGs and these animes, it's like, yeah, he's super old and grizzled. He's the veteran. He's like 29. I always thought that was funny. What does that make me now? But anyway, yeah. So they usually come from different backgrounds too. It's this group of people, so they have different backgrounds, they're different classes and races, and they're from different nations. And then typically these people come together to fight some type of collective threat, whether the threats to their nation, their country, themselves, or the world. That's kind of a standard convention of JRPGs, and it was something that I wanted to duplicate in, or not duplicate, but I just wanted to showcase in Sirius Unlimited. I guess duplicate's the wrong word. So each character, you'll see when you read Sirius Unlimited, that each character kind of comes with from their own world. They have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they have their own backgrounds. And as the reader goes through the story, just like in a JRPG, you'll learn more and more about the backstories of these characters. And then as they encounter each other, you'll see how some relationships are formed, some for the good, some for the bad. It's just that's kind of the way it goes. So I thought that this structure would be pretty cool to insert into the novel. I think fans of JRPGs and video games in general, especially if you enjoy like action adventure type video games, I'm thinking like just the old 3D world games, like just exploration. There's not really exploration. Let me take that back. Let me walk that back. It's more like, if you enjoy story-based RPGs, think like Final Fantasy or something like that, then you'll most likely enjoy the novel, for sure. So when I think about video games and the mainstream media, it's interesting because I feel like even though to me, video games have been a legit medium for decades now. Even going back to some of the Super Nintendo games, like I talked about Lufia 2, like I remember feeling that emotion as a 10-year-old kid, watching these 2D sprites on an old TV. So and there was nowhere near the Hollywood level production or the graphics or anything like that there is today. But I think an example of this is I recently started watching House. And yeah, I know I'm like 10 years late to the House party, but it's a really good show. I was leave me alone. I couldn't watch it. I was in the military at the time, so I really didn't have time to watch House. But now that I'm watching it, I see it's a great show. Not just like the medical drama standpoint, but Dr. House as a character. He's, now that I'm writing my own novel and I'm creating characters, like, man, the writers just did such a great job with this character. And of course, Hugh Laurie as the actor portraying him. But yeah, he's weird, he's moody, he's just a straight up jerk sometimes. And they often show him playing video games throughout the show, at least in the first 2 or 3 seasons. I'm on season 3 right now. So House will be playing like a Game Boy Advance, or he'll be playing like a PlayStation Portable, and it's always annoyed me, as a gamer myself, when I see people playing video games in movies or in TV, and the sounds are like that of like a 1970s arcade or a damn pinball machine or something. It's super annoying. I'm like, have you not played a video game in the last like decade or something? Like, games haven't sounded like that in a very long time, especially like a console game, or even on the Game Boy Advance or PlayStation Portable. You can have like regular sounding music and sound effects. Most games do, unless they're intentionally going for that retro effect. Anyway, I just think it kind of diminishes video games as a legit medium for storytelling. I just don't like it. And I'm not sure why they do this. I'm not sure if it's because, mainstream people, at least back then, of course, House originally came out in like, I think it was like 2005 or something like that, 2004. It was a long time ago. But I guess video games definitely weren't as mainstream, especially for adults back then. But still, like, come on. It's just know your source material, right? But I mean, think about it. I just think about it this way. If you ask anybody who's played like a recent AAA title, like The Last of Us Part 2 or Final Fantasy VII Remake, you don't doubt, they will probably tell you that they felt the emotional gamut throughout playing those games, Like, they cried during moments of heightened emotion with the characters, and they felt the sweat of anxiety as they guided these characters throughout the game and the situations. I think this is the true nature of video games as an art form and the capability of what they bring to the table. When I was playing, I think back to when I was 9 years old and I was playing Donkey Kong Country on my Super Nintendo. I had no idea that it would become, the games I was playing were part of that now the legacy of games that has now spawned $1 billion industry, a new sports phenomenon through esports, of course, and just become a more legit and mature way for creators of all types to express their artistic vision. I just couldn't see it back then. Because back then they were just toys, and they were curiosities for hobbyists or weird people like Dr. House. Like, those were the people that played video games if you were an older person. In the mainstream media's eyes, of course, but now it's very common for most adults to have played or, seen a video game, which I think is actually pretty cool. I've been gaming for over 30 years now, and I've seen the industry just grow and change. It's kind of grown up. In the last session, I mentioned how teenagers now have grown up with YouTube and Twitter, and I did, kind of mention that we've grown up with games, and they're kind of a part of who we are, and it's the same with me. And at the end of the day, Sirius and Limnic is a novel. It's not a game, but I just think it would make a fantastic JRPG. Not JRPG, but RPG in general. It doesn't have to be a Japanese RPG. But seriously, when the book releases, and if some game dev liked it out there and would be willing to turn it into a game, I would be all for it. I would jump on that. Most authors want their books to become a movie or a series on a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon or something. I want mine to become a video game. I guess times certainly have changed.
Music for the Sirius and Limnic podcast was provided by Ryan Fonger. For more information about Sirius and Limnic, visit keithhayden.net and subscribe, or follow @KH_author on Twitter. For future episodes, subscribe and follow the Sirius and Limnic podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher.